Our cameras recently caught up with #1 New York Times bestselling author Sherrilyn Kenyon. She filled us in on her latest book, In Other Worlds. The book is a collection of 3 novellas filled with magic, fantasy, and romance, and they're all gathered together in one volume for the first time.
My mother would say that I was born telling stories. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but I wrote from birth practically. Before I could even form words, what I would do is I'd sit there and drew pictures and comic strips. So I've basically had imaginary people my whole life. They're always around me. It's a compulsion that I have. If I don't write for a day or two, I'd start to get into like DT, so I always have to be around my crazy little friends. I have done research since I could first open a book. I was that nerdy little kid that they used to make fun of who would walk around with these giant tomes of medieval lore in junior high and high school. So yeah, I always do research. My grandfather was a faith healing evangelist. And then on my other side, my grandmother was a Native American. So growing up, I was around a lot of very spiritual people. My other grandfather was a rainmaker too. So he would go out and he would douse for wells, and I was just exposed to all of that growing up. And I noticed that my family, well, they were very accepting of things that don't make sense. You hear things, you sense things. And I was taught to listen to those inner voices because there's something from the other side trying to talk to you. Interesting thing about how I got into genre, and one of the biggest problems that I had ever getting published was the fact that I don't nicely fit into any genre. I grew up reading some of everything. So when it comes to writing, I take a little bit from everything that I've read, which is mystery, science fiction, horror, romance, and I just kind of stick it in a big cauldron and, shake it up, and whatever comes out, comes out. The first books that I did were all done under horror and science fiction. Then they, and most of them were Dark Hunter and the League books, which were straight science fiction. And, I've always done a lot of fantasy kind of things. So that's how I've got into one genre. It's just always been there. Other Worlds has one of my League stories, which are my assassin science fiction that I do. And it also has one of the Dark Hunters. It has Sebastian, who's a shape-shifting dragon. And the third story, Nightly Dreams, is totally unrelated. That's actually kind of explains why I write. It's a story that I don't know really where it came from. I was on a very long road trip and I was trying to keep myself entertained. Sebastian first appears in Night Pleasures, which is the first of the Dark Hunter books. In Dragon Swan, it's about him and his heroine, and they start out in Richmond, Virginia, then they go to the past, which most of the dragons, because they're huge, tend to live in the past. He actually is a cousin to Max, who lives in Sanctuary, who's been in almost all of the Dark Hunter books. The next one in it is called Fire and Ice, which Adrian, the hero, appears in Born of Ice, which just came out. He's the child, if you've read Born of Night, or if you haven't read Born of the Night, his father's an assassin, and he followed his father's footsteps. He ends up being very brutalized one night when he trades himself for a pregnant woman to a psychotic killer. And it's a very tragic story, but it's one that is really important to the League series. And Devin, who's the hero of Born of Ice, was his best friend growing up. So Nightly Dreams deals with my weird psychosis about how I feel what happens to characters when writers don't write about them. It's almost like the characters that are in the book, the hero of the book, is a character that was abandoned. And he's trying to get the heroine to start writing again. And it deals with what happens to writers when they lose that creativity, when they decide for various reasons that they don't want to be a writer anymore. And it's how the characters kind of revolt. So, I could not be more thrilled to see all 3 of the stories together under one cover. It will be, I just can't wait. Oh, they're family. My fans are always family. They are, not a minute of the day goes by I don't want to check in on them, make sure that everything's okay with them. We've cried together, we've laughed together. So they're just like an extended family to me. One of the fun things that we got was Caitlin gave me this, and it is a pineapple in a towel. In the scene in Fantasy Lover, Julian appears in a green towel, and there are pineapples on the banister, so Caitlin made me this. Rebecca Bet gave me a hammer. I think it was last year when Acheron came out. There's a scene where the hammer gets thrown at Acheron, so she created it. And then I have Rain gave me this. It's a Simi bear, and it even has little sparklies like Simi would have in the Hornays. Another one of my favorite things is I have a handmade mask. There we go, which I love. It reminds me of when I used to live in New Orleans. I've got to find an outfit for this one day, I promise. Well, a lot of the fans have been asking because it's been really hard to find any of the anthologies. So whether it's Dragon Swan, Fire and Ice, or even Nightly Dreams, this finally will give them an opportunity to get the books again.